Okay, we're going to study three main theories today. The first is the interactional view. These are all going to be different videos so that they can upload easily to the internet. Okay, the interactional view. It's by Paul Vlatsovic, and he views the family as a system. Rather like if you took a mobile and it has all those hanging pieces, but they're also interconnected. And each piece operates in a specific way because of its connection with those other pieces. So, thinking about a mobile and how it's balanced, one of the things about that is if you hit one part of it, it affects the entire mobile. So rather like when one family member gets sick, the entire family feels the effects of it. So if you're thinking about that in terms of communication, certain habits that one member may have will affect the whole family system. So, Vlatsovic believed that in order to understand the movement of any signal figure in the system, you have to actually examine the communication patterns among its entire system. So when somebody says you're not just marrying, the spouse, you're marrying their whole family, that's true because they bring with them all of these different habits and idiosyncrasies that are totally based on their initial experience generated by their familial communication patterns and connection. So, because the whole system is predicated upon, and I know this sounds weird, but it's based on the concept of balance, family homeostasis is always a goal. Homeostasis in general is the tacit collusion of the entire family to maintain the status quo. So, it's like when there's anything going on in a family, whether it's, regardless of how horrible or dysfunctional it is, the family will actually try to keep it together and maintain that status as opposed to try to change it. And the reason why is because the unknown is always more scary than the hellish reality that they exist in. But it takes a lot of courage to break out of that homeostasis, to get beyond that. Not impossible, because all things are possible through Christ. But it is the natural inclination for a family to seek homeostasis, regardless of how unhealthy or dysfunctional it may be. So, when you think of homeostasis, some examples of unhealthy homeostasis are games without end and symptom strategy. Now, games without end are any kind of cyclical behavior that might create a scenario where it's a never-ending cycle of unhealthy reactions and responses. The book gave an example of a wife who nags, and then the husband withdraws, and then she nags because he withdraws, but he withdraws because she nags, and it goes on and on and on. And the reason why people continue to play this, it's because it serves a function for both of them, both blame and justification. She blames him for withdrawing, and he justifies himself and says, I only withdraw because she nags. So it's like a way that people cope with what's happening, but it doesn't mean it's good. Not all coping is good. Second thing, symptom strategy, is when someone decides that they can't communicate, but they assign it to something outside of themselves or that's bigger than themselves. So, like being drunk. Oh, I can't talk right now, I'm drunk, or whatever. Or they blame their communication foibles on the fact that they were drunk. Or they're sleepy. So they're like, oh, I can't have this conversation right now, I'm falling asleep. Or I have a headache, something that's beyond their control. So, and it's not that these aren't legitimate excuses some of the time. It's if they use that excuse regularly to avoid a difficult conversation. That's not healthy. Okay, so one of the questions that you're going to have to answer as a result of watching this video is this. Are there any examples of games without end or symptom strategy that you can identify in your family. And you can either think of your nuclear family, like your original, the family that you came from, or the family that you've created, maybe with a spouse or, children or whatever now. Or if neither of those do you have ready access to, I will also extend this to the concept of an urban family. When I was in LA, I totally had an urban family, and those friends were family to me. And the reason, and I don't mean just closeness, but there was 4 of us, and we knew everything about each other, and we were interdependent. This can't just be 4 people you know. They have to know each other. It has to actually operate as a balanced system where all of their actions affect and interact with each other. Okay? Okay. So, the symmetrical interchange and the complementary communication are 2 different forms of communication. Symmetrical is much less common because it's an equal share of power. However, it relates to an aspect of complementary communication, which is called the one-across style of communication. It's not a show or an exertion of power, rather a sharing of power. But the exertion of power is in either a one-up or a one-down type of communication. When you're trying to one-up someone, like in Genderlex last week, it's an opportunity you're trying to exert yourself as the dominant and have everyone else be the submissive. Now, Genderlex associates that with just masculine forms of communication, but it can happen in any different gender or situation depending on the motives of the person. But also, a one-down communication might be something that you do where you're actually elevating the other person, you're putting yourself down, not in a self-deprecating way, per se, but rather possibly as a sign of respect. Calling someone sir is showing them deference, calling them madam, deference. There's other different types of examples of that. But one-up, one-down communication, that's a critical part of interactional view because it also shows or manifests in ways like a father-son relationship, mother-daughter, where it's parent-child, dominant, submissive. Those are examples of how in the family that can create both balance and tension. So, the last part of the interactional view I really want you to focus on is a concept called reframing. Reframing is when you take... Okay, reframing. Here's an example. Okay, so I worked in a camp, and our camp director was awesome. Clearly brilliant. Because he used to say, when we would complain about anything, he would say, oh, you don't have to, you get to. That simple alteration of perception made whatever we were doing not an obligation anymore, but rather a privilege. It's taking something that would be normally construed as one thing and deciding to look at it in a completely different way.